Okay, well, I've invited everyone back to continue our discussion about the divided brain conversation between Ian McGilchrist and Jordan Peterson. So this will be like part two. I'm just gonna like jump in immediately into the next clip from the video, and then we can discuss it afterwards. Whoop, sorry about that. Need to pause.
You want me to beatbox until we get there?
Yeah, yeah, or we can start talking about that Abraham conversation we had this morning again. Okay, here we go.
World that's
Yes.
it's multitudinous and too complex to even see. And then there's a perceptual act that categorizes that into like a perceptual image, house, say, and then there's a further compression and eradication of information that enables that to be represented by a word. And now,
well, the Greek philologist Max Müller said, it's interesting that we read encyclopedias, we have dictionaries, we read books, and we are with all these words, but none of the things that these words represents actually exists, because in the act of being represented, they are no longer the thing that was present. The very fact of representing it suddenly stops the presence of the thing. For me, this is very vivid in Wordsworth, and this comes back to some of the things you were saying about the liveliness of the childhood mind. That when he was a young man, and particularly as a boy, rambling in the Lake District, the world was very much still alive to him and coming into being for him. But that as a man, he went back there and, as it were, couldn't avoid seeing the landscape as, oh, a picturesque mountain, a picturesque lake, one of those, if you like. And this is what he means by the phrase, the shades of the prison house growing round the closing round the growing boy, in his intimations of immortality on reflections of early childhood.
So this is from this book. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream.
Yes, that's it. This is what I'm referring to. And this really is one of the more important differences. I would say probably the core difference, that, as it were, one world is real, vibrant, unknown in part, only known ever to a degree, and ever more coming into being and ever more coming into knowledge for the right hemisphere. And for the left hemisphere, already cold, finished, known, dead, put in a book, stuffed on the shelf, filed away. And we now live so much in this virtual represented world, partly because we're very much cut off from nature, which constantly reminds you of its vivid, uncertain liveliness. It confronts you with its audacious beauty and vitality all the time, partly because we've learnt to cut our minds off from our bodies. And so we think in this enormously abstract way, and partly because of city life, partly because of technology, which means we interact with two-dimensional screens rather than the three-dimensional depth, which is in a room when you're with someone, which is why, as you know, and I know, because we've both helped patients in our time, that
Okay, so I think that was like that they got to the end of the part where they're talking about language and yeah, technological babble. Yeah, let's give Michael a chance to talk about, like, the early part of their conversation was kind of talking about like language and its limitations, and I think they didn't actually use the same terminology, but it made me think of when Michael talks about language as data compression. A lot of that kind of idea was implied in the way they were talking about it. So let's let Michael go ahead and give his thoughts first.
Sure. Well, I mean, I thought immediately of Sherry and her talking about the ways in which language distorts, which I think it's definitely right. There's something necessarily distorting about this this compression that undergoes when we try to represent, as he says, in language. Here's what's funny though, is that that distortion, in my perspective, can be both good and bad. It can be generative of its own kind, in terms of helping you to see more possibilities in that broader landscape, or it can be kind of reductive in terms of pulling you into a sort of either or mode of being, where you can only you're suddenly there's these vast limitations.
Well,
And
yeah, right. And the one thing I would want to say, what if I could have interjected in that conversation, the one thing I would want to say is like, wait a minute, like you're reading poetry right now, like in the midst of this conversation and talking about this, and it's like, so yes, like, but the we can use language reductively or we can use it expansively, and we can think that language is limited to only its lexical meaning, or we can realize that the right brain too is affected by language, even though it may not be the center of articulation. There's still, like, we have this like intuitive felt sense of a word beyond its lexical meaning.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, I think
there's like
you
there's
zeroed in on
the
the
feeling we get. There's the feeling we get from the sound of the word. There's the feeling we get from like the particular cadence and rhythm in which the words are delivered. Like when a poem is recited out loud, or when we hear a song. There's like there are like it's not like there's more going on in language than just that lexical meaning. Put it away on the shelf. We've got it sorted out kind of idea that McGilchrist is talking about. So I'm wondering if part of where I would disagree with, and I definitely have some disagreements with McGilchrist. I'm wondering if like the area where those disagreements would come in is that maybe he's not seeing the full potential of language.
Yeah, I think within that specific frame, and quoting Max Mueller, it's funny. Max Mueller is somebody that Barfield quotes a bit, but he kind of casts him a little bit as a villain, as somebody who has these sort of upside down views of philology or the history of languages and how they developed.
Right.
Because he was really big into that. But I think you kind of focused on the really important point, which is it really depends on how you view language. If you interact with language as with this sort of expectation that that it is a sort of dead, lifeless things, that words mean what they quote unquote objectively mean and nothing else, then yeah, you've and I think we're oftentimes encouraged to do that. That's what the smart person in the room does. They say, well, that word you just use actually,
Right.
means X.
Right.
And
Let's
here's
talk about definitions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
which goes back to that.
And I think
again,
when people point toward etymology, they're actually making almost the opposite move, because
Yep.
they're wanting to get into deeper into the word,
Yep.
into the
Mhm.
layers, like into the actual layered structure of the word as a living thing. And it's not like wanting,
Transcendent of
and
time.
it's not fixating on any particular lexical meaning. It's like, no, let's look at the word and all the nuances that it has, and let's breathe life back into this word, so it no longer is a dead object, but somehow takes on a living character.
Yeah, but it's also there was that Peter Kreeft video you shared a long time ago, where he makes the point about using language as a lawyer does, as a sort of gamification of how you can kind of catch people and win some sort of rewards, or kind of, or there's the other mode of language where you're actually using it as a means of communication, where your main and primary goal is trying to figure out what did that person mean. There's some reason that
and
word
I'm glad you
appeared
brought up
salient.
the lawyer thing, because this is something I know. This is something I know pretty well, because I was a very good debater. I have a background in debate, and I work in a quasi legal profession, and I can tell you that the name of the game in that world is make sure that your definitions carry the day. That's really the most effective way to win any argument, is assert your definition and make it as narrow as possible, because you want that definition to coincide with what your objectives are. You don't care whether it's representing the fullness of what the thing could possibly be. You don't want any nuances of meaning. You want to tie it down as fixedly as possible so that you can win.
Yeah.
You know what the easy, I mean, all of this, everything that we've said, to me, can be summarized in, like, using language, it's using it as mammon, using it as currency, using it as a transaction to get something. I mean, that's essentially what you were just saying about lawyers, or using it as a Eucharistic, interactive, communal way of being. That's what communication should be, is a reciprocal dance between two people. I mean, it's iconic. That's what it means to be iconic. If you're treating words as static, dead things with static, dead definitions, like, that's essentially treating them as objects that you're just using and manipulating to orchestrate your reality. But that's just fundamentally not what words are. And I feel like, I don't know, McGilchrist, I feel like probably knows that at some point, but he said something like that, like he was contrasting the left and the right. And he was saying that, like, words over here, or the articulation, the dead, write it down in a book, put it on a shelf. Well, that's treating words as idols, as static things. I don't think you have to do that.
Right.
I think there's a way of treating words, even though they are in a Barfieldian way, even though they are alpha thinking. It's different than the mere perception. It's a level up. It is a condensation of something bigger and unrepresented, but it doesn't have to be static.
Well, think about what's going on with the words when you sing a hymn in church, or when you just listen to, or you just listen to a song that with words, or you read a poem that you really love out loud. That is a completely different kind of use of language. And there's, like, in that interaction, there's no limitation of the word to the trying to fix its, like, this is its specific lexical meaning. Which is why ultimately, like, I mean, poetry has meaning, but every single person who reads that is going to have a slightly different meaning that they experience in that, because everyone's perspective is going to see different parts of the fullness of what those words mean.
It's personal, and it's unity and multiplicity.
But that
It's
doesn't
like,
make it meaningless, though.
No, it doesn't.
Or
This is like,
arbitrary.
I was talking to my wife last night about books, and I've said for a long time that I've given my hierarchy of books, and I think quality fiction is, like, at the top. I mean, poetry could be up there too, but the reason, it's like a comparison we were talking about, because my wife recently read 1984, which I was very excited about. But I was telling her, like, 1984 is good and true. It came up because essentially I was talking, this is an aside, but I was essentially talking about how my kids have just, like, I feel like relationally and emotionally beat down by them, where, like, they are Big Brother and I'm at the end of 1984 and I'm just like, I love Big Brother. Like, I just love your, whatever you want, you win. Like, I'm tired of fighting. But I was talking about how 1984, though, it's more like along the line of the spectrum of, like, an Ayn Rand novel. Like, the fiction is a conduit for an idea, for a principle. Big Brother, I mean, it's good. It's a good book and it's true. But that is a much different kind of a book than Dostoevsky or like, I always talk about Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory, or Loris or something. Those books are true too, but, like, they're not a conduit for
the best books are about the best books are books about being human.
Yeah, they're about being, not just ideas.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's like, if the purpose of your book is to, like, criticize an ideology, it's going to be a less good book than a book that is, like, just fundamentally about the experience of operating and being. And actually, and the best books the best books will reflect how being is communion, in my opinion. Like that's what happens
Yeah.
in the best books. And in the best poetry too. Like that little like when you read a really great poem and then you just have that little like epiphany like at the end, like that's what's going on there. Like it's like this little moment of like where you're like drawn into participation into the song of being.
And I think what we're supposed to learn from poetry is not that poetry is something that happens in these kind of very special word games, but that it's again, something of what we're supposed to see there is this, that all of reality is poetical in this nature. I don't know if anybody ever heard of this guy, Daniel Tammet. He's like a really high functioning autistic guy.
Okay.
That I think he was on like 60 Minutes, or I encountered him a long time ago. And he's unusual in that he, from a very young age, he was kind of locked in his own world. And for him, like in this private world of his, like numbers became sort of took the place of what was for other people. Like for him, when he dealt with language, it was always like he was having to translate every language he encountered back into his own private language, of which for him numbers were very dominant. So for him, he memorized the number pi to some incredibly ridiculous length. And he recalls at one point, being in a room full of adults, and he's like this young kid, and he's just going through and recounting the numbers in pi. And for him, it's like he's reciting a poem. Yeah. Like every one of those numbers, even though they're so prosaic to us, like he can tell you like, oh, the number this looks like this. And like the number pi for him is this incredibly beautiful number that has all this depth and complexity to it. So it's funny, like even something that we take to be so prosaic is still, if you have the eyes to see, is still has all this poetry. And he wrote a book, and I haven't read this book, but the title of it just, entrances me. The name of the book is Every Word is a Bird We Teach to Sing.
Mm.
And that's so
it's
true.
A dope title.
That is great.
Because it what I love about it is it speaks to the life that is inherent in words, and it is in a certain sense they're subhuman, right? These words, but they have a life in them, and we change and modify and teach those words to have new meanings and to contribute to this poetic expression.
They co-evolve with us,
right? And it's really strange, like, because language, it can be this really dead thing, but it also can be so illuminating. So like in the example of like a good book, like there's the old phrase, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And this is very true. But on the other hand, then you have this kind of paradox where a good novel, like a Dostoevsky novel, like I can't imagine a movie or even a 10-season TV show that would encapsulate in thousands and millions of moving images that complexity that's there in the relationships within that book.
And it's important to note that what you're talking about is qualitative and not quantitative. Like, like I was actually like, I got into this like, and I'm wondering if this ties to the right. It seems I don't know. This is a question I'd like to ask. Like to ask McGilchrist, because it seems to me that quantity naturally belongs to left brain thinking. And that quality is something that is very nebulous, that we really that we can't, it's hard for us to lexically define, but we know it when we see it. And so to me, that seems to come out of the right brain. And it's like, it seems like the way you can see, I mean, like when he talks about like just how damaging this like left brain dominance has been to our culture, it's like, it's the fact that we have like expanded the idea of quantity and conceived of it as potentially infinite that is the root of our problem, because materiality is finite.
Yeah.
And like, so like, I was thinking back to like when I was at Thomas Aquinas College and first studying like first studying Euclid by actually reading Euclid as opposed to like my high school geometry class. And it's like, you know, it immediately jumped out to me that Euclid defines he says the point is that which has no part. But then when he talks about the number of potential points on a given line, he says that it is indefinite, not infinite, right? And in Greek thought, like this idea of the quantitatively infinite was considered absurd. Like they had this like naturally adverse reaction to it. And our culture today, it's like we have made the pursuit of this potentially infinite quantity that we've come to intuit as like our objective. And we've done it at the same time where there's been a complete loss of an appreciation of quality.
So Nate, this is maybe unrelated, but this is what it made me think of, and this comes up often. So I was listening to Rogan the other day, and he was talking to Scott Eastwood, and Rogan will bring this up. He brings it up occasionally, and it's something that he just emphasizes, so he must believe it, because he said in a number of years, he thinks it's within decades, we will be able, like through Elon Musk and Neuralink and stuff, we will be able to read each other's minds and get at each other's intentions. And so we'll be able to, like, that will just eradicate conflict. And so like he has this, and like to me, that's a perfect example. And I maybe told you this, but like my 4 horsemen of technological babble are like infinite progress.
Yeah.
Which is connected to consumerism.
Which is what that it specifically is the pursuit of infinite quantity.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah.
And so I mean,
and quantity is always opposed to quality.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Right. Yes.
But that's always been one of my. Sorry, my wife's sleeping. I'm getting excited and they get loud.
Yeah. We'll try. We'll all talk in calm tones. We'll all try to have as nicely deep and resonant voices as Michael.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
But that's kind of always been one of my things because this has been a huge thing for me forever. Because I love to talk about food ethics or just consumption ethics. And I say this: if Christians really would get this holistic worldview, which isn't unrelated to this right brain, left brain stuff.
No, not at all.
That wasn't just about endless consumption and getting the cheapest thing possible so that you can then give as much money as you can to some missionary across the world that you don't know at all. But like if you actually bought quality products that were maybe meaningful but not expedient, that had value and beauty and truth and goodness all intrinsic to them, like it's made by, like maybe you have a local artisan in your community that does art and makes like their own and fires and kilns their own like tiles that you put in your backsplash. Like, you know what? Those are expensive. They cost a lot of money because they cost a lot of time. But like, is buying that kind of thing, if you buy something, better than buying, you know, the cheapest possible backsplash that you can that comes at Home Depot that, you know, is shipped from China and made by slaves and that's polluting the world because you outsource it? Because it's this. Let
me ask you this question, because this came up when I was talking about this with Sherry, the same idea with Sherry yesterday. It's like, if we had instead of the conception of infinite quantity, if we would just like accept indefinite, like there are definitely like the universe is really big, we like it, the numbers are beyond our possibility to calculate, but it's not actually truly infinite. It's still finite. Materiality is finite. Like there is no actual possibility of the quantitatively infinite. So if we were to let go of that idea of the possibility of the quantitatively infinite, and we were instead just to rest with the indefinite, do you think that would have an impact in our culture on the level of greed that we have? Is not the very idea that there can always be more, and that there isn't some limit, even though we might not know what that limit is, but like that lack of the belief that there is any limit, like drives kind of psychologically underpins the desire to always have more.
Well, maybe. And what that made me think of what you just said, because that's essentially the idea, right? This is, again, Elon Musk colonizing Mars, but it also makes me think of the Unman in That Hideous Strength. Because like that's him. He's just like, well, like when this world is destroyed, we'll go colonize Paralandra, we'll colonize Malchondria, we'll just go kill these other planets and consume them and to infinity and beyond.
Okay, the perfect example of this. I have this materialist atheist friend who I've been friends with years, and it's like in terms of the way he acts, in terms of his interpersonal relations, he's a great guy. He's loyal to his friends, he's generous, he's kind, but like his thinking about these kinds of things is like completely broken. Like he has this idea where he calls brown peace, where he says, look, necessity is the mother of invention. We'll never get off this damn rock if we don't screw up the planet. So we actually should screw it up faster. Like, because that's the only way we'll get motivated to do it. So like the species will eventually die out if we don't just use everything up as fast as we possibly can. So actually the best thing to do for the future of our species is to screw up our Earth as fast as possible to force our hand in order to get off this rock.
Yeah, and then
that's the mentality. It's like
I
you
get
just
it.
It makes the universe disposable.
Well, and this gets into even the ideas of I mean, what that makes me think of is vampires. I'll tell you why. because it's this idea of like infinite quantitative life breathing, existing infinitely without a certain quality. I mean, that's like the curse of the vampire, right? Is they live forever, but everything they love dies.
Yeah, it's
so
the extension, right? Extension of materiality. Yeah, that is the vampire, right?
Yeah.
Because they're a very material. It's not like a ghost. A vampire is like very bodied. It is like a reflection of this, and it's consuming. So yeah, the vampire is the perfect image of this because it's like it is full of desire, it is always consuming, and it is highly material. And yet we realize somehow it's like we know it's not really alive, right? Because it's undead. We know that's not really life. So at some level, we know that we're tricking ourselves and that this is no kind of life ultimately.
We know it symbolically. We know it
symbolically. We know it is
brain.
that it's not really life. It's just undeath, right? That's why we call it the undead, because it's like they're just a semblance. They're just a semblance of life. They're not really alive, but they're not really dead either. So yeah, I think that's the perfect image of what we're talking
This is the Catherine Pickstock idea about the modernism becoming necrophiliac.
Yeah, right, because of its obsession with this like materiality. Like that's what it's like. It's just that's what it becomes. It's like,
well, and here's the thing too, like the thing that's hard about like so to your question of will not thinking about things this way, like not feeding into the however you want to frame it, the collective unconscious, or like the way that your culture feeds into the way that you think individually, will changing that help us not so mindlessly consume and be greedy? You know, I don't know, because here's the thing too, that because you said materiality isn't infinite, but here's the thing, like this is why I love Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl so much. We don't even know what materiality is. Like we don't even like that all of that is still based in the assumption that what reality is material. We don't even know that.
Well, I don't think it is.
Right.
I'm just I was giving like I was right. I don't think you can separate matter and spirit are not separable. There's not that's not.
You're right.
There is only one reality, and it is matter and spirit.
Okay, I want Jess to talk. I don't think Jess has spoken yet.
No, I totally want to hear Jess.
And then Sherry.
I don't know quite what to say. Like, I've never been good with words, so not that I can't speak, but just like I've never known how to write too well, and my spelling's terrible, and but you know, so like we were having a conversation the other day about, and it was when you brought up, Nate, the point about everything's, you know, what if this idea of the infinite and having infinite quantity is actually there's a problem with that. And you brought it up because I was asking a question about.
Oh right, yeah, you asked the question about.
I was
right?
asking. All right, so if God's infinite and He's going to create something, does He have to like
Right, yeah,
pull
that's
back from a space
right.
in order to not be in an area, in order to pour Himself into something, and then you brought that up,
Right.
and why am I saying this? Well, because I took a test when I was in junior high, and I scored like in the 99th percentile for spatial reasoning or spatial intelligence. Like I see everything as like physical models, and I can, like, if you show me a picture of the gears, like even in 3D space, I can tell you which way the end gear is going to turn if you turn this other gear, and like how like I can just follow it along really easily. And that's even when I'm talking about theology and stuff, I'm spatially mapping it everywhere.
Yeah, you're talking concrete images all the time, which I think far from making you inarticulate, makes you highly articulate, because there's almost a poetic quality to the way you speak, because you always speak in these concrete images. But please continue.
Yeah, I can't help it. So I'm glad you
well, I love it.
useful.
I love it. I find it highly useful.
And so I actually just did a Google search. I was like, what is spatial intelligence, right brain or left brain? Because there's a way to systematize it, like with the gears or whatever. But it's actually a right brain. It's a right brain function. So it's part of the whole picture. And then the left brain will systematize what the right brain kind of maps out. That's what I was thinking of when you guys were talking. I don't really have anything like in response necessarily, except that
quality is harder to picture, right? I think that's why, because it's like quality is very ineffable, like by its nature. It's like I don't know. I will tell you when I see it. I don't really know how to define it, because it's related to beauty ultimately.
Right.
So,
right. But when we're talking about words and definitions and stuff, like I feel almost like I don't know what you guys are talking about. because I don't have that relationship with words. Like,
gotcha.
Like
gotcha.
I don't read a lot of poetry. Like I am moved by stories and narratives. But when you're my relationship with words is I don't even know what it is. Like hearing you guys talk about it, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm like, how do I even think about words?
Oh.
Anyway, that's nothing constructive. Just what I was thinking.
No, but thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Sherry, you kind of like jumped in the middle of this. So, should we move on to the next clip? Let's do that.
Sure.
Try to find the right place. Let's see this one. Okay, I think this is it.
We decided, Sherry, that we're gonna sing while Nate's looking for clips. We're just gonna sing in between to fill the
No, I have
space.
it all in a document. It just takes a minute to pull it up.
Ready? Our God is an awesome. Let's sing around.
You evangelical, you. Let me know if everybody can hear.
There are proper limits to science, otherwise you're peddling untenable naive scientism. But it is a very important thing for us to respect and to do honorably. Reason is enormously important. I use science and reason as the basis of my book. But again, reason, as Pascal, famous mathematician and philosopher, said, reason is poor if it cannot see its own limitations. And so it has limitations, but it can achieve a very great deal. And the same actually is true of intuition. It's had a very bad press in recent years because I think, again, psychologists, I think you've alluded to this, they like things that can be taken down into bits and shown them, we can find the mechanisms. Intuition's a bit hard for that. And imagination has been, again, relegated to the sort of children's play box, that this is something to do with fantasy, whereas in fact I argue that quite the opposite, that whereas fantasy may be an interesting decoration on things that we already know, and the left hemisphere can do that, imagination is actually how we go to meet the world and understand it, and we have to imagine it into being. There is no alternative. If we are not imaginatively engaged with the world, we just can't see a lot of things that are there.
Well,
So we need
for
to
me,
use all of these.
that
We need to
makes
use
me
all
think-
of these faculties together, not just one or two, as we now do. Sorry, carry on.
Well, I wanted to comment on your discussion of imagination and the manner in which it brings the world into being. So we've already discussed the fact that the realm of your experience is dependent to some degree on your attention, and that's associated with intent. And intent seems to me to be, it's future oriented. To have an intent means to attempt to move from one place to another. And hypothetically, it's a better place because why move otherwise? And so to act in the world with intent means that you're playing out something that's imaginative, because to posit that one thing is better than another and therefore want to move towards it, you have to have imagined up a better world. And so what that means in some sense is that we're always meeting the world in a way that imposes our imaginative attempts to make it better upon us, upon the world, but that also brings the world into being. And so, and I guess I'm saying that because I'm trying to grapple with the why of your book again. You're implying throughout, and more than implying, that we have a paucity of viewpoint that's demotivating and dangerous. And you're implying as well that has something to do with our obsessive concentration or utilization of left hemisphere functions. That reminds me of Heidegger to some degree, and his claim that moderners use the world as produce, that we tend to reduce everything to its functional utility insofar as it can be exploited. And like, I have some sympathy for that, because we have to exploit the world to live, but
yes,
so let's say we do lose.
Okay, I just want to jump right into like that last thing that Peterson said.
Yeah, you
Does
have to
anyone have
exploit the
The
world,
world to live. Yeah.
No, you don't.
I think like that is, I think, at the root of like a lot of what Peterson gets wrong is like right in that statement right there, because it's like, and that's why he's like, boy, why do you think he thinks that?
To me, that's functionally transactional. I mean, he thinks you have to take something. It's like this. It's this weird like competition, evolutionary. Hungry in tooth and claw. It's a fight. It's probably a lot of, we've talked about Peterson's conception of hierarchy and whether or not that's healthy or accurate in offline conversations. And I think it's all rooted in that. It's rooted in a, I don't know, like an dualistic either or non-communal relationship with the world. It's actually Jacob and I. So Jacob and I last night in our conversation from the Discord, we were talking about Trinitarianism and panentheism and God and things, and he just kept saying, this idea that God is one, and I was trying to relate it to Kabbalistic panentheism, because God is the thing somewhat that holds everything together, and so the thing that is a unity between the unity that draws all multiplicity together, that allows things to commune, is God, is Christ in me, is Christ in you. You have something in you that creates a unity, all of you guys, that allows me to communicate with you. there's something in you that is common to both of us that allows us to commune. There's something common with me and a rock that allows me to interact with it. There's something that allows us to commune together. And that's and I
Right, but
think that's the
exploitation is the
enchanted
but
worldview
but exploitation
that
is
have.
very non-communing.
Huh?
Like the idea of that we have to exploit is a specific. It's an
Yes,
explicit
it's,
rejection of communion.
it's the opposite of that.
Right.
Yes.
It's the opposite of communion. It's like I I don't have I can't put a nice face on this. It's diabolical. Like it's really like that idea that we must exploit the world to live is like, boy, what do you think exploit means and what do you think live means?
Okay, so that's the question that I want to ask. I want to ask, what does he mean by that?
Right.
Right.
Is he talking about an evolutionary exploitation of the world? Because that's what I think he's talking about, right? When you, you know, if you're a caveman somewhere and you get up in the morning, you don't have a refrigerator or a grocery store. Like you really have to go out there and exploit the
But
world.
why are you calling that
Yeah.
exploiting?
Well, because you're using it for your own purposes, no?
Why are you seeing it that way?
Well, to me, it's, you know, I mean,
You only okay, that implies
well,
you
that's
have to
true,
be
that's
viewing
true.
you have to be viewing the things that you're interacting with as only objects in order to view it as exploitation.
Right, which wouldn't have
Right?
been,
Like think
yeah.
about
Well,
when a Native American you know kills a deer and then says a little prayer over its soul, that is an exploitation.
right,
That is not an exploitative action
yeah.
because
but
you're
I agree with
recognizing.
I agree with Sherry that I would interpret what Peterson is saying. Not, I bet if you asked him what he means by exploiting nature, by it's meaning like taking something and using it for my own purposes, not the
Right,
definition
for
that you're
my
using.
own purposes, which
Yeah.
which implies an individualistic worldview.
Or for the tribe's purposes or whatever. Like I would say there's a way you can say the Native American is exploiting the buffalo but it's not in the same way which you mean. Like I guess it just like this is the question. Like what does Peterson mean by that? I would
I'm
assume that he's not meaning in the industrial
No, I think he is. I think he's reflecting withdrawal of participation. I don't think I think that
maybe
Peterson is still living in a very dualistic, non-participatory frame, and I think you can see that in a lot of the things that he says and does. I think that's why he doesn't understand sacrifice. His idea about sacrifice is entirely transactional. He doesn't get it at all. He
So
still has this dualistic withdrawal of participation way of
So
looking at the world.
I agree with you, Nate. Let me bridge the gap because here's I think what's going on. I think if you asked Peterson, and this gets at what I call the Sunday school answer, and this gets into actually right brain, left brain stuff. If you asked Peterson, if you pulled out that clip and said that we have to exploit the world to live, and if he was privy to this whole conversation, listening to it, he would nuance it. And he would see what that entails and he would correct it. But that's in his left-brained egoic Sunday school answer knowing. What I think happened in this conversation, where I'll agree with Nate, is that it's not like a Freudian slip, but I've often talked, there was a guy who spoke with Paul a long time ago. His name was Luke, actually, and he's from New York. And he was talking about his church experience. And he said, I learned a long time ago to not pay attention to what people said when they were thinking about what they were saying. Pay attention to what they say when they're not thinking.
Yeah.
And that's actually what analysts
Right.
do. They just let you talk, just get people talking. And then all of a sudden what they really think comes out that they don't even know what they think. If you ask them explicitly what they thought, they wouldn't tell you.
Yeah,
Because they don't even know.
What I see in Peterson in a broader context is someone who is struggling for their footing.
I think what Peterson let out there is that he really is fundamentally, even though he struggles with this, a materialist and an evolutionary.
Right. Like I actually see him, even in the question, besides that that bit about exploiting the world, what he's getting at is he wants McGilchrist to nail down a solution, right? And that
The
I think,
why
is the
of your
bigger
book, yeah.
Why?
That's
The
the
why,
problem right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's the left brain,
Yeah.
right? That wants
And McGilchrist keeps trying to show him, no, Jordan, it's the vision the vision itself is the solution.
Yes.
McGilchrist
It's like
is acting
you just need to see it.
right, and he acts like a slippery fish when it comes to giving
Mhm.
him an answer, and that's in that regard, because it isn't
Because he can't give him the kind of answer he's seeking.
well, you can't grasp it,
Right,
right?
exactly.
You can't possess it.
Right.
So
Which is again, like that's also inherent in the idea of like exploitation is like you're not assuming you're assuming that only you have a view in and a view out, and that the environment that you're relating with doesn't also impact you. Right? It's like it's a seeing you you as the individual as like the center of being.
right, like I actually see Peterson in this conversation as someone who wants to help people.
Oh, for sure.
And so in doing so, he has to systematize a way of repairing the world, right? So that he can go out and implement it, because he's a pragmatist. And and so and this is I think
But the only kind of pragmatism that works is a transcendent pragmatism. So like it's like
AKA wisdom.
Maurice Blondel is the only pragmatist who I will align myself with.
He has to do this. He has to make this journey in order to find that out. You see?
Yeah.
Like, because he's gonna be doing this, right? Trying to catch this slippery fish. And it's just gonna keep slipping out of his grasp. And at some point, he's gonna have to realize that this is not something you can systematize.
Well, and also here's the thing, just in case anybody watches this and thinks that I like hate Peterson, I do not. I do not hate Jordan Peterson, and I think that what Jordan Peterson acts out is very relational, very participatory, and very personalist, like the way he actually behaves in the world. And it's like he's not. I mean, the way his brain works is the way his brain works, and he doesn't. I mean, that's okay. We need different kinds of thinkers.
Nate,
We need
you're
people.
just-
We need people like Jordan and people like Ian to come together and have conversations. It makes
You're
it all
just
seem more
fulfilling
clearly.
you're just fulfilling your role for our community to keep us all from becoming just ideological Peterson sycophants.
Yeah, I think I do criticize Jordan more than most. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that like how personally indebted I am to him. Like if I hadn't because I struggled with understanding. I struggled with understanding what faith was my whole life. It's like I had, and it was Peterson's definition of faith just struck me like a bolt of lightning, and like really like put me on a completely different path. So
What was it?
This is kind of why I think he has such dissonance when it comes to God, right?
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, because he's like I never realized it before until I watched this conversation, how actually left brain Peterson is. But then he's acting out something different. And then if you consider his statement, you know, what do you mean by God and what do you mean by believe? I mean, to me, that's a left brain problem, right? Like I can't do the thing until I have it nailed down. I don't know what God is, and I don't know what he is, right?
Right.
But in a way,
And
that's like that's really honest, because that's the truth. Like,
Of course.
none of us know.
No.
No, it's true, but the lopsided left brain stuff that Ian McGilchrist is getting at is this, and I said this I think in our last conversation, is the impulse, the existential feeling within you of discomfort when you can't nail things down, the thing that paralyzes you into inaction when you can't nail things down.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's showing your idolatry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that was like that crystallized for me, that, you know, understanding when I watched this conversation.
Right. And that's why Christians deconstruct.
Oh, of course.
Their systems fall apart. They can't nail everything down. It doesn't all fit together. And they're like, well, I just don't believe. And I'm just like, that never was what belief was. So don't worry.
Right.
So you're
Right.
fine.
Yeah. Right. Well, so like, I think, well, Peterson's own definition, like the one that like that reframed my thinking is like, that's how I had like my whole life. It's like, I thought belief was just like about like having the right system of ideas that was like coherent, right? And that you thought corresponded to reality. You believed the set of ideas that you thought corresponded to reality. That's what you believe. And Peterson said, it's what you act out. And I'm like, and that, like, the reason it struck me like a bolt of lightning is that what I was acting in the world. I was acting as if I believed that Christianity was true all the time. So what I was embodying and acting out was the belief that Christianity was true. But I couldn't believe it because my idea of what belief meant is having like this absolutely tied down, I've got a solid debate case, I can prove this point, understanding of the thing. And then once I did, and then you know, eventually that path like led me toward Owen Barfield. And like once it's like, oh, I mean, and like once I like came to truly trust that imagination is a truth-bearing faculty, like that was it. It was like I'm hitting the ground running from that point on. So
I think what you're pointing towards there is that belief is not about it has nothing to do with the propositional, which is the point Peterson makes, but it's about it's about what you trust. Right. And that word credo, which begins the creeds, I believe, really means I give my heart to. Right. And we reveal what we give our heart to by our actions. Yeah. You know, that's because when the rubber hits the mode, you can't go left and right at the same time. So when it boils down, that's where we reveal what we really trust.
Right. That's why people who are in doubt need to be in church still. Everyone has a certain degree of doubt. If you had no doubt whatsoever, you wouldn't be a human. So it's like, if you think you really have no doubt at all, you're lying to yourself. You're assuming a standpoint you can't have because there is like none of us fully know God. We have to trust that trust that God is what we hope him to be.
Yeah.
Because he's a person and not an object.
To give Peterson a little bit of benefit of the doubt, I mean, right before he makes that statement about exploitation, he talks explicitly about a paucity of viewpoint that's demotivating and dangerous, which is what that exploitative mode of being is. It's very demotivating to think that I can only survive by exploiting others or the world at large.
Well, he was talking about what he thought the argument that McGilchrist was making was, though. So it was like, this is the argument you're making, but I see that you have to exploit the world some way in order to live, and it's like, it seems like you're critiquing that.
I also think he's leftist or Marxist or communist smuggling with some of those statements. So he actually he's got a conception of what that ideal is, right? That is demotivating and exploiting things.
And attaching it specifically to Marxist ideology.
Right. Yeah.
Like he's conflated all those things.
Yeah, he's smuggling it in there without saying it out loud, right? Because I think that is the problem he wants to solve culturally, you know.
I don't think so. I actually don't think so because I see, particularly because of the way McGilchrist talks about relation, like McGilchrist is talking about personalism and not collectivism, and they're very, very different things. And I don't think Peterson understands the difference.
No, I don't think he does. No.
Yeah. So I think Peterson might be part of the reason that Peterson's might be reacting the way he does. He might think that McGilchrist is Marxist struggling, but that's not like I mean, McGilchrist has a pretty close relationship with Rowan Williams at this point. Like they've had several conversations. In fact, he mentions he's getting ready to have another conversation with Rowan Williams, like in this conversation. And like Rowan Williams is a personalist theologian, and like the implicit like kind of like process theism and open theism that McGilchrist is talking about is also personalist. I think there are some problems. I have a problem with obliterating the distinction between being and becoming, but it's definitely personalist and not collectivist. And Peterson is so rigidly stuck on individualism that he sees any move away from individualism as a move toward collectivism, and he can't see the personalism that is neither.
What's interesting though, Nate, about Peterson's individualism is that he's constantly saying that you can't, if you want, like he talks about, who is that guy that does the, I think it's PHA, he talks about fair play, right?
Yeah.
And making choices and how those choices are narrowed down. If you want to play fair, then you have to think about yourself, but then you have to think about your family and your community, right? So he speaks in these relational terms.
Yes, he does.
He understands that, but he understands it in a left-brained way. Like kind of like that exploitation word, where you do the good thing for this and this and this, so that you can continue to play the game down the road, right?
So he sees some of the. Go ahead.
I think he has a more sophisticated. I think he does deal, but his problem is, I think he's since he's recovered from this thing. What I find frustrating about him, he's got his intellectual bandwidth is very narrow, and he's kind of aware of that, and so he's always trying to pull things into his systematic thinking from the past rather than be changed or challenged in the present moment. But like, I mean, even in that statement, he was talking about imagining a better world, and that he's saying that we do that all the time. That's how we engage the world, is we imagine a better world, and that's what we bring to bear. And that's, I think that's true. And he has a sort of sophisticated, evolutionary, evolved idea of how those ethics come into reality. And I do think they're not exploitative even in his mode of conceiving of those things. He feels, I think there's some, if you push came to shove, he would say there's something about the fundamental nature of reality that makes it such that we are always inclined towards the good. Now he doesn't, again, I think you're right to push that he needs to have a more personalist ontology to get more sophisticated, but he's there. He's got all the propositions, but they're strung out in different parts of this intertwined long.
Well, I think they're actually more. I think they're less in his propositions and more in his personal makeup, because he actually is a high character individual who actually cares about people. Like existentially, he acts out personalism.
Yeah. This conversation would be better if they were in person with each other.
Right, yeah. But ideologically, he feels like he's obligated to defend individualism. And the reason he feels he's ideologically obligated to defend individualism is that he is so worried about collectivism, rightfully so. But the thing is that individualism is just as poisonous as collectivism. And he doesn't quite see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yet. I really agree with everything you said, Michael. I think I'm just going to ask this as a question. Like, do you think that Peterson thinks that relationships make you?
I think he does.
Does he think it? I don't know.
Yeah.
He certainly acts it, and which is kind of
Well,
more important.
I'm really asking if he thinks it. Like, do you think?
I think he does.
I
do. I really do.
Okay.
Well, I would just say,
I think
I would just turn his own reasoning on him and say what matters is what he acts out. Like, what worldview does he actually have faith in? Individualism or personalism?
But I would say Peterson is fairly exceptional. I think all of us, if we're honest, right, in this room, all of us have massive gaps between what we would say we believe and how. If you sifted through the correlative evidence in our lives, you'd be like, oh, well, why'd you do that? Why were you impatient with your wife that time?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't believe that, actually, on some fundamental way. So
Right, because we
But-
all
but
want
I-
to be the sovereign individual. This is like, it's a temptation, and it's like, it's a diabolic temptation. Like it definitely is. Like the belief that you are an absolutely sovereign individual who has a right to unlimited autonomy is a diabolical idea. That's
Agreed.
just as
I
collective.
don't think
and
he
collective-
believes that. I
And
don't think he believes that.
collectivism is a diabolical idea too, because it eliminates all the uniqueness that is you. So you are unique, but you are still relationally defined.
Yeah, but his individualism, like I said before, it has concentric circles, right? So I don't think it's like a really stark, strong, staunch individualism where it's like, be damned, all the rest of you, right? Like it really it demands that you take into consideration everybody else. And the one thing
That
about
you imagine a better world,
right,
which is
and
what he just said.
right. And the one thing that I always really stood by when it comes to some of his ideas is that it does start with you. Like his big beef is don't sit in your messy room with your
Yes.
Cheeto dust everywhere and make a placard to change the world. Start with yourself, right? And I agree with that. It does.
That's a personalist move too, because it says, because it's an acceptance of responsibility.
Right.
It is an embrace of the fact that, like, oh, I don't get just define whatever identity I imagine for myself because I'm an absolutely sovereign individual, and whatever I want, I can, I can bring to bear. It's like that call to like to enter into your responsibilities is a personalist move.
Like the way I see his Peterson's perspective, like let's say compared to Ian McGilchrist's, is it doesn't have any life in it. Like it's not, there's no divinity in it, in a sense. Like it's not
Right.
three-dimensional yet. That's why I keep saying yet, because God can breathe life into that, and it can get up and walk and actually be relational in that sense. I don't think he understands the Trinitarian aspect of relationship. I think that's the missing.
I don't think he thinks he's worthy.
Well, that's because
I think he's got a lot of like culturally internalized Calvinism going on.
If it's possible.
So,
Well, I mean, he does. If you
and
look at his biographical history,
and it's Jung that poisons him. It's all this Jungian like shadow nonsense.
well, he starts from a very negative place, like looking at the Holocaust, looking at the the Stalinist and
Yeah.
Mao regimes. Like he looks at those places, and that's where and it is astounding that he somehow moves towards something good in spite of that, but he still has got his eye on those things. And I do think they capture his imagination. Like, Sherry, you were talking about how his wife did the remodel and got rid of some of that communist art that was everywhere. That is stultifying. I am impressed that he was willing to look at those things so long, but and still come to a sort of a positive mode of or thinking about the nature of reality and being.
Well, those just to interrupt you for a minute, Michael. Those, to me, that communist propaganda stuff that he had they were like icons of what he could be, right? Like this was.
Yeah, they were the things he was afraid of becoming himself.
Right. Right. Yeah. They were the reminders that you have, all the potential. And this is a big part of his message.
And that's why when he talks about cleaning the room, it's because he has this very dim view of the left brain's capability to get things right. And he's saying, you got to start, the left brain can do some good things, but you got to start really small and humbly.
Are you meaning right brain or left brain?
No, I don't know. Is cleaning your room? I guess clean your room's both. I'm falling into the dualisms I would criticize others for, but yeah, he there's the humility is such a fundamental part of what makes him effective in terms of his message.
Yeah,
and that start with your room bit is because here's the thing is like when you're the best way to get humility is to try and do something and fail. And when you try and do something as, you know, easy or should be as simple as clean your own room, and you come up against how difficult it is because of all the ways in which you've let yourself go and be disordered, and just like, that's humbling. And that somehow puts you in a mode where you can learn.
Well, you know, I was just thinking about the whole idea of asceticism and bringing the passions under control. I can't remember what it was that was just said earlier that sparked that thought, but you know, you can, oh, I know, you were talking about acting out what you believe and getting angry with your wife, right? Being impatient or whatever. And you know, you're moving along at a certain clip thinking, okay, I got it all under control. And then all of a sudden you're faced with this thing. And what that does is, or should do, is really help you to understand what it is that you do believe, right? And how you can auto-correct that, you know, or reorient yourself so that you don't believe that, because you can't stop those things from happening if you believe them. So you have to believe something else, right? And it, you know, this is, I think, what Peterson was doing with all this, you know, diving into Nazism and communism and all this, you know, tragedy in the 20th century was this reminding himself of the potential within himself to be that kind of person, right? So that he could be something else.
What do you think about the tone that he uses in talking to his intellectual opponents, though, in his public presence? Like, is that something that's going to be good or bad for him in the long run?
Tone?
Yeah, his tone. He's like very like, I got back on Twitter to like, for the sake of like, so I could, for promotion of my channel, I like figure I should probably get back on Twitter and interact on Twitter again, because I had canceled my Twitter account like over a year ago. And I got back on Twitter, and it's like I just like I get to like looking at Peterson's tweets like depresses me. It's just all like, it's all full aggro war mode all the time. Like, it's just like, you know, I mean, at some point it's like he does need to come to the recognition that the people that he is battling against are still human beings.
Yeah. I think Twitter's probably a bad place to measure him by,
terrible.
But I would say, like, even in this conversation, like, what I found frustrating is how frequently he was interrupting.
Yes.
And he's gotten specific feedback about that he's been open with and honest about, but he it's almost like, again, I think it's a feature of the fact that his mental bandwidth is diminished, and he's so quick as soon as he finds some sort of like lock and key arrangement with something somebody says that fits with some part of his system,
right?
And he's like, oh yeah, that has to do with what the Egyptians believed. It's like, you know, Peterson, like everybody knows your works. Like we know what you've gone through. Like everybody that's like, there's very few people that are coming to you new. And so it's like, I think for a long, long time, there was so many new, he was kind of like this, you know, phenomenon where he was always getting new people. So he could repeat himself sort of endlessly and still like, you know, it would still be novel to, you know, 30% of the new folks coming in. But like, he's kind of reached this tipping point where I don't know, he's not, it doesn't seem like he's moving forward as much. And,
well,
I think
that's kind of the norm, though, Michael. To be fair to him, it's like most public intellectuals really only ever have like, I mean, you could say the same thing about Ian McGilchrist, right? He's always talking. Like, if you've heard me Ian McGilchrist a few times, it's like he's going to repeat the same things, like, right? So it's kind of like
difference, though, Nate. There's a difference because the space that Ian McGilchrist creates, I'm going to talk about that again. In his relationship to people is vast, and the one that Peterson creates is not, right? And I like what Michael said about Peterson trying to, you know, grab on. I really saw that in this conversation, you know, McGilchrist would say something and Peterson would grab it and fit it into his system, right? And that to me is like a frantic attempt to keep something constructed. and I think that is demonstrative of a system that's crumbling. When you grab on and you're trying to, all these bricks are falling out of your system and you're grabbing other bricks and you're trying to prop it up, right?
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and it should be that his system is crumbling, because look what happened to him.
Jess is trying to say something. Let's get him in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You can, there in the GJAC conversation, Peterson was authentically surprised and
Yes.
and curious. And I think you're right as a whole. Like, he's trying to plug things in. But the other thing is like, I think it's one of the detriments of just being very intelligent, is you've got everything thought through. And so when you meet someone and they share an idea, you're like, well, that kind of corresponds with this, and I've already thought it through. Like, and I know when it leads to here. So I'm going to ask you this question that where is at the edge of where I'm thinking. This is what I constantly see him doing. So, and since he's been sick, like you said, he's been kind of, his mental capacity has been limited. So he hasn't been able to push himself to the edge as much. And so he is drawing from the past to try to bring up ideas. But, on the overall theme of like kind of what we're talking about, I think, Peterson wants to defend the West, and he is so kind of flummoxed by the idea that when you defend it, you should be kind of chastised for defending it, because of all the, this is the Jonathan Haidt's kind of work that like, look at all the good things the West is doing. And I heard someone say, I forget who it was, is like, the saying, man doesn't live by bread alone. Well, modernism is just bread alone. Like, that's all it does. And Peterson is basically being like, look at all the bread, and everyone else is like trying to, and he's like, let's not destroy the bread system while we're trying to figure the rest out. Because he does understand that there's a meaning crisis, and there's a, there's this crisis of, in the West. So, I don't necessarily, yeah, I mean, I don't really see a fault with him. I just see that that's where his stuff is ending, and whether he personally can make another leap or not, I don't know if he has it in him.
It's not really the West that's under attack, though. It's just the Enlightenment. It's just the Enlightenment that's under attack, and the Enlightenment is hot garbage. I mean, it's like, see, it's under attack for a reason.
Yeah, like, I agree with you, but Peterson would say, well, look at how it's transformed the world, and how poverty has been.
Did it though?
Yeah, but
is that what transformed it, or was what transformed it something that was underpinning it, that it was feeding off of the whole time?
I don't know. I mean,
that's the question.
I mean, it's obviously like within the realm we're talking about, because like we're like, all right, let's get a chicken in every pot. Well, that means we're going to have factory farm chickens. And then now the poor person who wants a chicken has to feel guilty because their chicken's factory farmed, when they don't really have a choice of where to buy a chicken. So they have to bear that guilt, as well as eating the factory farm chicken. As it's only the rich people that are allowed to, that are, I think of the Portlandia sketch where they go to the restaurant and like they bring out the menu and it's got the name of the chicken and the farm, and they're like, can we go visit the farm? And
yeah, who some of the most morally bankrupt people on earth are well-to-do Americans who make fun of poor Americans for shopping at Walmart.
Right.
Like, seriously, go get.
Yeah, and so this
seriously, just like none of that. Do you not see what you're doing?
But I need to make another point here, because I think Jess I was watching very carefully where you were going with your observations, and you were talking mostly about pre-crumble Peterson, and I was talking about post-crumble Peterson, right?
Mhm.
And I think those are two different animals. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
He
and
really,
I mean, I could throw in a feminine perspective, which probably will just flatly land in this in this conversation with three men. But I think that like it, because this is so personal to him now, that this is not about, like, I see his attempt to save the world dwindling and his attempt to save himself increasing.
yeah,
That's
to
what I
save his
see.
reputation.
Well, not his reputation, but his sanity, his health, right? And this dissonance that he feels. And not only that,
I don't know. It's a bit about his reputation too, because the whole Red Skull merchandising nonsense. It's like,
Oh,
if he were,
yeah, I'm not familiar
if he
with
were,
that.
if he were functioning at a higher level, like he'd have just ignored that nonsense. Like really, like there was no reason to breathe any life into that. That was just such a low bar culture war move. And then also it just brings out like the worst parts of him, like which are like the Jordan Peterson Inc. kind of
Mhm.
aspect of this. It's like,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know
yeah.
anything about that, Nate.
Oh, you
So
don't? Okay.
no.
Okay.
But I just want to drive this point home, because I think there's something under the surface lurking here that is much more powerful in his life than we actually see, and that is the journey that his wife is on.
Yep.
Okay, his wife is on a completely different journey than him, and it's taking them in different directions. You know, if he's honest with himself, which I think he's fairly good at, he can't say that his system is working for him, right?
No,
and yet hers is working for her. She's enjoying communion with her family. She has peace, personal, you know, inner peace. She could probably be told she has cancer again and gracefully move into that, you know, not in a panic, you know, clinging on to life kind of way. Whereas Peterson can't do that, you know. And I mentioned this before in one of our conversations that, you know, he would often use the illustration of being the strong person at the funeral, right?
Mhm.
In his talks, of being able to support everybody and not the one who's, you know, falling apart. That you know, that your goal, your aim is to be that person that can hold everything together. And yet when Tammy was diagnosed with cancer, that was the moment that he fell apart, right?
right.
And I think that's really significant.
Because he
really
failed to be everything that he wanted to
Well,
be.
but not only that, but if you look at what I just said before about the aesthetic experience, when you think you've got it all together and then all of a sudden you stumble and fall, it forces you to actually ask the question, well, what do I believe, right? And he had to have been faced with that, because he you know, he can't have spent all those years saying all those things and then actually not being able to do them. And I'm not critiquing him for that.
No.
I'm not. But what I'm saying is that it's forcing him. And then there's this contrast, you know, of his wife and himself, right? And that's in very close proximity. Like he has to get up every morning and look at that,
Yeah.
right? That image. So anyway, that's my feminine rant done.
No, I think that's
I-
very.
I've noticed
I get
that too, Sherry, and I've listened to Tammy Peterson's talks on Michaela's podcast, and
Yeah.
they're so interesting because she's talking to her body and like asking parts of her body what it needs when it's sick, and she's like having visions of light and like all this stuff where like that's inaccessible to like a stoic. You never see the stoic talking to his pancreas.
That's really what he is too. That is what his worldview is. I mean, like
Yeah.
he's a pagan stoic. That's who Jordan is.
Well, he's even kind of he Stoicism does provide meaning, and he was
Yes.
and there is a point that he's making that, like, in a world that's lost its meaning, Stoicism is a step up for sure. But like, Tammy is doing something next level that is beyond that, and there's not a good way to categorize it, like not even in a Jungian way, because she's totally mystical.
Right. Right. And but the thing is like, but the thing is, it's like, uh, this is the thing though. I really think that like this whole idea of the meaning crisis is not right. And I've said, and I've been saying this, and I've been saying this for quite some time. I don't think that like John Vervaeke's calling it a meaning crisis is quite correct. And it's not meaning is not the deepest thing that we're looking for. We want a relationship with God. It's a sense of our desire for a sense of belonging, of true belonging, to be in in personalized, personalist relationships with one another and with God is far, far, far deeper than our desire for meaning. In fact, that is me like the deepest meaning you could have is to be in that kind of relation, and that is far more fundamental. And what I really think we have is a belonging crisis, like more than a meaning crisis. And the reason we have a belonging crisis is because we have embraced this view that we have to choose between either being atomized autonomous individuals who are completely responsible for finding happiness and meaning for ourselves, or we are pulled toward being part of these like mindless collectives that are really not deeply relational, that have just become about like, something shallow. Like there's no deep connection in those groups.
Well, I've always struggled with the idea of it being called a meaning crisis, because not so much the word meaning, but the word crisis, because totally different emphasis. But because when you're in a crisis, you need to fix it. And I don't think that you need to fix this. I think this is the U-shaped journey.
Yes.
Unless the seed falls into the ground and dies, right?
Are you suggesting, Sherry, that we're supposed to be in a meaning crisis so that we find
That's
that
what
the
I'm
only real
saying.
meaning is to be in relationship with God?
But see, the thing is, this is exactly like when I read Saving the Appearances, I thought, oh, okay, I know where we are. We're in withdrawal of participation.
Yeah.
And Barfield makes it very clear that the goal is not to go back, not to find meaning, but to work your way through and integrate all of that experience historically and everything into a new form of participation, right? And I mean, let's just assume, who knows? I mean, maybe 100 years from now, we'll really be in a meaning crisis. But let's assume that we're at the bottom right now of this U-shaped journey.
We can hope.
I mean, if we are, we're freaking out, right? Everybody's freaking out. We're like, oh my God, like we're in hell.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there is a coming out, right? And you can't do anything about it. You just gotta ride it through. Like seriously, you need to ride it through. You need to be the person that Peterson talks about at the funeral, who's just like, calm down, everybody, it's okay. We're all gonna die, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right on.
Which is like that, but see, the thing is, like, that very idea of like acceptance of death is like, that is like one of the things that like we just can't accept. Like that's like Michael was referencing earlier, like, Catherine Pickstock, and like in After Writing, like one of the things she talks about is like how we've become so obsessed with like, avoidance of death, that we've kind of had this like ironic necrophilic kind of turn, like because of that. So yeah,
I mean, it's precisely for that reason that you lose quality and you end up with quantity, right? Like,
Right.
if you see, I mean, I've seen a lot of these, evangelical pastors, more of them than, let's say, Orthodox priests. Orthodox priests are kind of like, they're on their surfboard just riding riding this meaning crisis wave, right? But they got all these evangelical pastors because why? Because their numbers are dwindling. Not because they're trying to figure it out, but because they're trying to keep the cash flow, and I know that's a harsh critique, but I think it really is a part of it. It's like I was saying yesterday, when I look into the forest and see a tree, I see something that descends down to hell, right? That spreads its branches and gives me shade, and that ascends to the heavens. But if I was a logger, I would see board feet and stumpage fees, right? I'd see profit. That's what I would see.
You would just see, right, an object that
I
you
would
can
just cut it
exploit.
all down. I just cut it all down, right? That's my solution.
So instead
And-
of the majesty of the world tree, you see like just a product that you can exploit, just a dead object to be turned into useful things.
Right, and that's if you perceive this as a crisis, then you need to fix it, and that's the problem.
Right.
God never asked us to fix anything.
Oh, not right. Yeah.
Right.
Right. And
I mean,
also suggests that, also the other thing is like, it suggests that it's like, it suggests that it's a problem rather than like a state that's actually, it's kind of like,
Well, this is becoming. Like, I mean, if you actually believe in becoming, that journey is fractal in nature, right? It's gonna happen to me. It's gonna happen to my family. It's gonna happen to my community. It's gonna happen to the country and the whole world,
yeah.
right? And I mean, you could flip the whole thing on its head and say, hallelujah, we're all in the meaning crisis now.
Right.
We finally all got in the same boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're all connected. We're all
Connected.
we're all
Yeah.
going to the same place together, and you have to have that perspective, or you're not willing to make the appropriate sacrifices.
Nope. It's all winners and losers. I refuse. Just kidding. But yeah.
It is interesting because there is like, in reading a lot of Barfield, there's this sort of gravity that you come away with of worrying about like what personal responsibility you have towards the shape of where things are going. And I do think there's like, it's like these two things you got to hold in tension. You do have to have a view that even if it gets really, really bad in the near term, that it's still going to, there's somehow it all gets redeemed. But also that there's a certain ways in which your story and the personal choices you make is going to have a real impact on how that plays out. That
Yeah. I'm not fatalistic. I'm not really, I hope I don't sound like I'm fatalistic, because I'm not at all. Like, I think this is why Jordan Peterson's message about the individual and the cleaning of the room really appeals to me, because I think that it does start there, right? And you do make a better world when you do those things. And but you're not doing it because you're trying to fix something. That's my beef, right? You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's moving out into that pattern of being that is what's the word I'm looking for? Like you're stepping into the river, basically, right? You're participating with being when you do that. And
Right.
And you're not trying to, shore up the banks and all the rest of it.
But here's the thing. I feel like, sometimes we can get so moralistic about the quote unquote doing it for the right reasons. I think God has aligned things such that if really deep down, like the things that I don't know. I feel like
maybe I should say rightly oriented instead of right. Okay.
Right. Cause
rightly oriented is what I mean.
I think with like if we had some sort of infinite perspective and we could rewrite the story of our own lives, I don't think we would take out a lot of the missteps and the heartaches and all those things. Like, I think like somehow like we would actually want those things in.
Yes.
And I think a lot of, like, you know, we're reading through Revelation, right? And a lot of the things in the kind of the response of the saints at the end of all this, and the revelation of the whole story at its kind of culmination, is a sort of like, oh wow, like I didn't know how beautiful and how wonderful the whole thing was. And that is inclusive of all this stuff that right now we would probably say we want to just quote unquote fix it and get rid of it. So it's and that, I mean, it's hard for me to square that, because there's a part of me that is the rationalist.
No,
and,
well, that's really, no, that's really good, Michael, because like that, it's like, okay, so it's like, if we can just like, this is why the culture war is like so dumb, because like what needs for the culture war to resolve itself, what needs to happen is that like the sides in the culture war need to, like, you know, look at each other face to face and realize that they have something to learn from one another. Like they're like, neither side has no legitimate concern.
I mean, for
Like,
me,
they're both seeing something good, and they are both blind to something that is not good within the way they've construed things. Like,
and Peterson at his best is fully capable of articulating that. It's just, I think lately, maybe because again, his diminished capacity and some of the personal attacks on him have landed in such a way that he has a lot of become more personal and kind of, you know, knee-jerk sort of reflex, you know, responses.
I don't know. I think it has a little bit of like, you fight to win kind of attitude too. Like, I don't think Peterson is a stoic, so he has no instinct toward non-resistance to evil by force.
he's also from a small northern Alberta town.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you roll up your sleeves and get it done. But no, you know, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. I had a really good thought. It was about fixing something. Like this meaning crisis is, you know, like we had, let's say at the turn of the century, you know, with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, all the things that we were fixing were, well, let's say good. We thought they were good, right? We were trying to make people's lives better and provide them with things that would make their lives easier and make them healthier and give them the ability to survive in the world. The problem that we have now, it's not mechanistic, it's a relational problem. The meaning crisis implies that we have problems relating to each other.
That's why I said that's why I say it's a belonging crisis, because that's what we've lost. We've lost that we no longer know how to relate to one another.
Right. And to fix that problem, to me, the only way to fix that problem is to actually coerce people. And I think that's why we're in a mode of you know, feeling like we're being coerced, right? Like you can't take two people and make them like each other.
Right.
How do you do that? You can't do it.
So that means, so here's the thing. That means that someone needs to surrender and take the high ground and stop trying to resist evil by force.
Right. And so if you follow Peterson's line of thinking with the individual looking after himself, it's a form of it doesn't take power away from people. You're not telling others to do it. You're doing it, right? And they can emulate it if they want to. There's no coercion in that. That's why I like it, right?
No.
Right.
And there is something about being radically vulnerable and trusting of the other that just, I mean, people tend to reciprocate. People are somehow
but someone
would be
has
ashamed to do otherwise.
Someone in this mess has to be courageous enough to do that. Someone has to be not concerned about how their followers are going to react. They're not going to be concerned about like, you know, like what the reaction from their own camp is going to be. Someone has to be bold enough to do that. And I don't think it'll be Jordan. I think he's got enough on his plate. It's not even fair for us to ask it to be Jordan. It won't be him, but someone needs to do it.
Well, Jordan's not, like I said, there's pre-crumble and post-crumble, in my opinion.
Right.
And the post-crumble Jordan is not doing the same thing anymore. He's saying the same things, but he's saying them, he's asking questions for different reasons. And
Well,
it's
he started to, I mean, he
very
started to kind of like degrade the quality of his dialogue, like even before that, like as he was descending. So it's like, and he's not come back out, like there have been moments,
John
like
the Pajot conversation.
the Pajot conversation. And I think at points in this, like he did allow McGilchrist to press him
Yes, he did. Yeah.
on some things in a way that was a way that was very healthy. Like, you know, I mean, Ian McGilchrist like called bullshit on his neoliberalism with like in no uncertain terms. And Peterson was like willing to admit some of the shortcomings of his worldview. Like, so he didn't say, you know, he wasn't absolutist. So there was some give and take there. Um, but I just don't know. I don't know if Jordan just has. I don't know if there's. I don't know if there's enough left for him to be. You know. But
He,
the only
he
problem
needs
is
to go
I
back
don't know.
to the biblical text, because
Yes,
I think that they're new and strange enough for him that he can't systematize them.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that I'd be interesting to see what happens if he does that.
Yeah, he said he was going to go back to Exodus, or maybe he talked about
I think
Proverbs as well.
Proverbs he was talking about, but I don't know when that's coming. I'll definitely be interested in seeing what happens. So let's go ahead and move on to the next clip. Let's see here. Aha, okay. Oh, there we go. My mouse wasn't cooperating for a second there.
This is where we need Luke to sing. Or Sherry. Sherry, can you sing? She's not here anymore.
Of opposites, and a very interesting philosophical question of the relationship.
I'm having technical issues.
Please stand by.
That's weird. I'm getting. Oh, there we go. I had a bunch of tabs open and it was giving me issues. Okay. Try this one more time. And okay. Should be good to go here now. Let me know if everybody can hear and see.
And so I
can
look
hear.
at the structure of the world, the theories about it, and what we can tell from physics and from the hemisphere hypothesis, what parts of it we may be perceiving with the left hemisphere and what we may be seeing with the right. And I look at the structure in the sense of the coming together of opposites and the very interesting philosophical question of the relationship between the one and the many. And then in the rest of the book, I look at time, space, motion, meaning largely flow, but all kinds of motion, matter and consciousness, value, purpose, and the sense of the sacred. Now, I argue that these elements like consciousness are not secondary, they're not derivative. It's actually irrational to suppose they are. Reason is on the side of the fact that they are ontological primaries. And I argue that actually also
unpack that for people, because there's a lot.
Well, it would take a very long time.
That.
Well, I can unpack the phrase. What I mean by ontological primary is that it can't be reduced to other terms. It can't be said that as long as you look at a brain in a certain way, you can work out what consciousness is. Consciousness is sui generis. It is of its own kind. It is not something that is derived from anything. It has to be a primary constituent of the universe. This is not a particularly any longer controversial view. It's held by many philosophers now in the form of panpsychism, in which something like consciousness is in the cosmos, and the cosmos perhaps exists inside consciousness, not my consciousness, but a consciousness field. And there are plenty of neuroscientists who say this too. Colin Blakemore, not known for being kind of away with the fairies, but they say this too. But I would also argue, and it's a perhaps harder thing to make comprehensible in a very short space, but that actually values are things that are there. They're not things we make up. They're not things that are like, I rather like that. They are built into the drive of everything. And I think that the cosmos has drives. You can describe them in all sorts of ways. It has the fact that it changes and moves in certain ways according to, quote, laws, which may actually not be laws, but maybe temporary habits. We don't know. They may be evolving too. But the very fact that this thing has this energy to evolve, to differentiate, to produce differentiation within union, this is a value of a kind. You can't get behind these. And most of our values, other than those of utility, this is good for me and I want to have more of it, which is what the left hemisphere is devoted to. Most of those other values are not reducible to sheer, material greed or feathering your own nest. They're often actually the things that are vastly important. Probably the whole point of the being consciousness at all is to come to appreciate the meaning of truth, goodness, and beauty, to have a sense of something awe-inspiring, which is really what we mean when we talk about the sacred, that we're humble enough to say we don't know everything, and we probably will never know. I mean, why should we? That's also a totally irrational idea, that our brains are so constructed that we should know everything. I mean, a mouse might think that if it could think that much, it would think it knows everything, but it doesn't, and we're evolving. There may be creatures in the future who think, what the hell did Homo sapiens in 2021 know, So I just want to get back into the frame that not all the things that matter to us, they are enormously important aspects of a universe that is not dead and static unless given a push, not without purpose, not without meaning, not without value. These things are in the grain, in the warp and the weft of the cosmos. Of that I'm certain. And the job is for us to find this. And most philosophers, wise people, sages, whatever you like to call them, in the past have adopted a view of the cosmos, which is exactly the one that one would expect the right hemisphere to hold, which is one in which things are not always certain or known, they're changing, they're interconnected, but the whole thing has a meaning. It is not a heap of fragments that don't mean anything, the modern malaise. So that's really where I'm driving at. If you see, that's the philosophical goal, is to help people see something that I think they already intuit. I mean, that was a response to the master in his emissary. I mean, apart from people enormously movingly writing to me saying things I never thought I would ever hear from writing a book, like your book changed my life, and I'm sure you've had this too. But people saying, what you're saying, I kind of knew. I've known this, but I couldn't find any way of articulating it. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason why you couldn't find a way of articulating it, and that is articulation in language is controlled by the left hemisphere. It developed very good tools for mapping out the world in a way that is very useful to its purposes. But the important things are hard to articulate in words. They're implicit meanings. All the deep things like love, religion, poetry, music, How do you say these in words? How do you say them in language? But they have extraordinary meaning and power. They're the things we live for, not for the things that we can say, put down in a notebook, if you know what I mean.
So what's driven you in this direction, do you think? I mean, you made a very large number of claims in that last section of thought.
Yeah.
For example, you've come to the belief that value is somehow implicit in the structure of being. That's what I understood what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong. And that it's,
no, that's right.
Okay, that it's unfolding across time. And I mean, I've been thinking about that exact issue an awful lot. Do you? It's very difficult to formulate this question. So imagine that we're drawn towards an ideal. Human beings are drawn towards an ideal. And imagine that you can detect that draw by your own dissatisfaction, in part, is that you don't feel you're living properly, or your conscience is bothering you. You feel that there's something more to be attained. You're embarrassed at your insufficiencies, right? So there's this ideal that's pulling you onward and judging you at the same time. And that ideal might be, well, the ideal human being. That's one way of thinking about it. And that's partly why I got so interested in hero mythology. I mean, is it a reasonable conclusion of your line of thinking that the notion of the ideal human being is somehow built into the structure of the cosmos? Because the classic, no. I don't know how to.
No, it's not. No, I don't think that at all. I want to scotch that immediately.
Okay, well, how do you scotch that if you start with your presuppositions? Like,
because my presuppositions have nothing to do with an already conceived plan that is just being acted out. This takes us back to the bad.
It wasn't necessarily implying.
Oh, all right. Well, okay, but all right. Okay. Well, I'm glad you weren't. But a lot of people think that if I say these things, I must be positing an engineering God who sort of tinkers with things and makes things happen according to his purpose.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I mean, I was implying that in some sense. I mean, because the question would be, where does your insistence that values are part of the structure of being, like, where does that find its limit? Because the classic limit of that is something like in fact, the definition of the utmost place of value in some sense is almost indistinguishable from the claim that there is a God. And so...
Well, a God is not the same as an engineering God. And I take enormous pains in the book. It costs me more than anything I've ever written to write the chapter called The Sense of the Sacred, in which I try to help people to a place where they can understand why people use this extraordinarily difficult word, God. You know, it's not a satisfactory term, but it's the term we have to name an aspect of our experience that if we don't name it, disappears from our lives. And that's not to say that there isn't something there that merits whatever we mean when we say divine. I mean, we haven't defined what we mean by divine. And we're back in the nets of language. We're trapped in the nets of language, as Schelling said. But what I'm suggesting is that, as Whitehead suggested, and come on, Whitehead was also the co-author with Russell of the Principia Mathematica. He wasn't a fantasist. He had this, I think, incredibly deep idea that whatever one likes to call the divinity, God, whatever, is the thing that the cosmos has relation with. Relation is at the core of being. I even argue that relation is prior to the relata, prior to the things that are related. That sounds nonsense. How can you relate? How can you have a relation if there isn't anything yet to relate? But there's a wonderful image called, in Indian mythology, called Indra's net, which covers the universe. And in it, the idea is that the filaments of the net exist before the net, before the crossing points, which are the things we see. And on those crossing points, there are little gems which reflect every other gem in the net. Now that would take a very long time to unpack, but perhaps it can set things going in people's minds. But the idea I have...
A gesture to the right hemisphere.
is that relation is prior to anything at all, really. And that therefore...
All right. we pause that.
There's a ton of stuff in there.
Oh, so much.
Good Lord.
So much. Yeah.
Yes.
We won't. That'll be our last clip for sure, because we will. That right there. If we were, that is almost inexhaustible material
Yeah.
for conversation in just that little bit right there. So is there anything that anybody wants to jump into first out of like of the many fascinating things that were said in that exchange?
Well, it's interesting how they both sort of how well it's interesting. McGilchrist doesn't, he's obviously not fond of using the word God. He even says so, and then he kind of punts to a Hindu kind of mystical conception of things that that gets away from the engineering God, which I think is right. But then like I'm I Peterson asking that question, he's like the ideal human. He's asking about Christ. He's like, is Christ built into the structure of reality in your model? Maybe I'm reading way too much into Peterson, but I don't necessarily think so. And
No, I think you're right about that. He's actually explicitly said that Christ is the ideal person, right?
Right,
and
but
so-
what's but what
Sorry,
isn't there?
go ahead.
Right. Is but
so
isn't
he's
there
trying to
something?
connect McGilchrist's values as
Right.
something that's bringing forth Christ, or that's manifests something about Christ, and McGilchrist wants to X that.
Yeah, because, and I'll tell you why he wants to exit. Because
Right.
if you, to me, it's implicit in the way that Peterson is talking about it, that he's talking about it as if, which is one of the reasons he keeps asking about the sub-creative or co-creative capacity too. He's like, how is it that I can bring this into being? So even though McGilchrist's framing is in some ways less culturally Christian, it's more ontologically and theologically properly Christian than what Peterson's framing is, because what Peterson wants to do is an antichrist move.
Mhm.
Like it's like,
Wielding.
how
Yep.
can I create
Wielding.
this and have it
Yes. Possessive.
Yeah,
for my
it's interesting because you can do that with the past. So you can watch a series of past events. You'll be like, this event led to this event, led to this event, and you can systematize that. And technically that's what science does, is it takes the most reliable things and then lays them out as systems or things that you can wield. But that's, and so like to say that so I think both McGilchrist and Peterson are asking interesting things, and I don't like either of their answers.
No, I have problems with both. Yeah. I think, but the funny thing is that like McGilchrist has the broken pieces of like what I think is a fundamentally correct ontology, like right there, that there's just, for whatever reasons, he's resistant to put all those pieces together. And I think the thing, like
well,
most
it's a
profoundly,
Trinitarian picture. It's
exactly
the
yes.
relation
When he says
being
relation
everything.
is right, when he says relation is prior to the objects related,
Right.
that's a Trinitarian ontology right there.
Right, but for him, it's the infinite relations of the infinite things.
Right.
And all of a sudden you've lost me.
But he also loses the coherence of his own thought, though.
I know.
I would just ask him to take seriously that phrase right there. When you said relation is prior to things, that means that it is also prior to the interwoven, like, oneness and connection that is definitely real between all things. There's something that still came out of something, which is that relational thing itself that you just pointed at. That's the triune Christian God.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly what you're pointing at. Like, that's the only place you get that idea. And it's also, he knows this too, because he connects it to the idea of unity and multiplicity.
Yep.
And he talks about holding unity and multiplicity in tension. So he has the structure of a Trinitarian ontology, but he wants to instead construe it as just a relation between God in the creation without understanding that he's already understood something at a deeper level than that by positing that relation that is prior to the things related. So yes, God is
So
God has that internal relational structure in addition to a relation to the universe that he creates. Sherry, you were trying to say
I
something.
made some observations. I made some observations while McGilchrist was talking.
Okay. Well,
And I remember him talking in the very beginning of this conversation. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally clear.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
In the very beginning of this conversation, he made comments about the right brain or the right hemisphere being comfortable with ambiguity. And in this clip, he reiterates that, but he makes it personal. He's comfortable with ambiguity, right?
Yeah, right.
Then he says something about the universe is not dead. He also, calls the worldview, heaps of fragments that don't mean anything. And he says that he's helping people to see what they intuit. Okay, so those are just a few things that he said that I noted down, because what they tell me is that he's completely right-brained, right? Like the way that he looks at the world is right-brained. So he talks about the problem with multiplicity and no unity. He talks about helping people to see, and he talks about imagination and intuition and ambiguity, and that the world is not a world of dead objects. Okay. And now I lost my, okay. So the engineering God, I can totally see why he would reject that off, like right away.
Because it's an anthropomorphism. It's a dumb idea. It's a dumb idea.
Right.
It's assuming that God creates the way we do.
Right, and it's
I'm
coercive.
sorry, it's dumb.
Yeah,
there's not a blueprint in the sky. That's not how it works.
Yeah, and then he talks about. Then he goes from the idea of the engineering God, which he's rejecting offhand as coercive, right? But then he says, but we still need to name it, because when we name things, we bring them into existence, right? But then he immediately goes into the danger of language.
Right, which is like, and thinking that you have it, like, which is, I mean, like, he has like his hesitancy as a healthy hesitancy. It's
yes,
like,
it is. It's totally
like, I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of difference between what he said and like what, like, Nicholas Acusa said, or what we talk about all the time. It's like he's just a right brain Christian.
Yeah.
who like is right brained enough that he is like doesn't even want to put a label on it. But like he clearly has a Trinitarian ontology. Like
right, and I think he's rejecting a preconceived cultural notion of what God is. Like Peterson says, well, that depends on what you mean by God, right?
Right.
And he says that propositionally, but McGilchrist is actually acting it out. He's like, no, I reject that. Offhand.
Because the cultural God, the cultural God can only be the God of your tribe.
Yes.
Like it cannot be the thing itself.
Right. And so because he's comfortable with ambiguity, he can leave it at that. Right.
Yes, exactly.
He can leave it at that. Yeah. And he won't go into the what he calls heaps of fragments that don't mean anything. Because that's really what ends up happening, right?
Right. I really hope that conversation between him and Rowan Williams that he said was coming up airs, because I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Because they're so close. They're so close. They're like so similar, and I just would like to see like maybe Rowan push him back toward realizing that that the structure of what he's talking about is ontologically looks like a Trinitarian structure.
Right.
So
and then in comparison, Peterson says, after McGilchrist says all of that, then Peterson said, well, what drives you? you know, as if that's even important in that
Right.
context.
Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I do want to like, this will be the difference between you and I and McGilchrist is like, that is like what he's described in terms of like trying to describe like God the Father in his unrevealed, self. That's right. But you still have to make you still have to deal with what to make of his revelation in Christ.
I didn't quite.
Particularly since his ontological structure is Trinitarian, he really needs to seriously ask himself that question.
You mean McGilchrist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, so that I would say like that's the piece that he's missing. Like that's the question that he hasn't like engaged with. So I think he already has a Trinitarian ontology, but he doesn't.
Well,
I think he's more dedicated to the values of liberalism and pluralism, and his concerns about like the potential of the exclusive claims that Christianity makes about Christ. I think he's more worried about that, which is why I think Rowan Williams is the perfect person to talk to him, because Rowan Williams can show him how that exclusivity can still join all things to himself, even in that exclusivity.
And it's interesting that Peterson brings up this specific. He brings up what drives you, and then he brings up the ideal.
Yeah.
And brings up. So you were going to share that, weren't you, Sherry?
Yeah. Because I just thought it was just, McGilchrist is out here in Cloudville, just like
Cloud City.
And then Peterson comes in with his target thing, right? He wants to find the thing, right? He needs to, but that's because, and
it's
this
heaven and earth.
Well, this is why I say I really saw how left brain Peterson was actually in this conversation, because he's doing this, and I think at one point he actually says he tries to grasp it, but it just keeps slipping away from him. And I was just like, oh, that's wonderful.
Right, because you can't grasp it. It's not.
Because that's the thing he needs to learn.
Because it's right.
That's not a need for him, right?
Because it's not an object or a system. It's a person, and you can't.
Right.
Like you.
And then there was a couple other things he said that I thought were kind of interesting. He said. He talks about being drawn to an ideal, right? And then he says, like, perhaps you're embarrassed about your own insufficiencies. And then he says, that's why I got into the hero story, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really revealing.
It is. It is
really revealing.
Very revealing.
Like Michael and I were talking about before, all this communist propaganda art in his house as an iconic reminder of what? Oh, all my insufficiencies, right? All the things that I'm struggling with. I have to keep this right up front and center. I'm going to forget, and I'm going to fall into that, and I'm going to be the person I don't want to be, right? And that's his only way of controlling that scenario. Like he isn't, because he's not walking in a Christian story, where he's comfortable with ambiguity. He has to set up all these signposts. He's got to, and he's got to focus in on all this stuff. And
because he's not. I mean, because he's not absolutely certain that materiality isn't all that there is. He's never really he strongly suspects that there is more, but he wants to know it. But he wants to know it.
Yeah, but it's really, like, if you think about it, it's what Vervaeke points out as the Protestant work ethic, right? It's I
was thinking about that too, and it's like, boy, and I was thinking about it in pretty negative terms, because I was thinking about like it's almost seems like it's a direct product of 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 Calvinist theology, because there's a way in which pursuing the path of perfection of the spirit, Calvinist theology makes that so ridiculous to even think about in Calvinist terms, that what it ends up doing is it just ends up pursuing more materiality. So it actually deepens the materialist turn, because they don't believe in the call to the kingdom is now, right now, this moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could go.
You begin it now and you continue it into eternity.
Get
But
off on
I
another
just wanted to
Calvinist
keep it-
rant.
Yeah.
Stop using depravity as an excuse. Not kidding.
I just wanted,
It's
yeah,
just
I just
leading to
want-
more and more materiality. It's
It's
an
true.
easy, lazy excuse. It's a lazy theology. It actually leads to less human flourishing, less genuine relationship with God.
yeah,
And it's just like, it makes it really easy to excuse bad behavior too. Like,
yeah.
that's a big sidetrack. You brought that Protestant work ethic up, and it's just like, couldn't help but just scratch that. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's applied to it ends up getting applied to materiality.
Why did you bring up
my
the
point.
Protestant work ethic?
Well,
As
because
far as how it relates to Peterson and how he's going about stuff?
because he's confronting himself with his own, like when he said when he said one is embarrassed, he didn't say me. He didn't make it
Mhm.
personal, but he used the term embarrassed about your own insufficiencies. Like if you rewatch that clip
Yeah.
with this in mind,
Right.
I think
Which validates what I was saying about him earlier.
because
Like,
when you tell the truth, or at least don't lie, you can only draw on what your your own experience of something, right? So I mean, most of the time, and then he made it personal by saying that's why he got into the hero story. So I thought that was an interesting turn after he described insufficiencies, right? And insufficiencies are, I think, this is a Christian problem, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant, to be fair. We talk about Catholic guilt and Protestant work ethic. It's the same thing, really, right? It's a thing that drives people. It makes them try to be better. It makes them, want to die to themselves, or however you want to put that, instead of just embracing it as being, this is me as a human being. I'm going to struggle with this until I breathe my last breath, basically, right? And I'm okay with that ambiguity, which is what McGilchrist is talking about, right? And so for someone who's concerned about not turning into something,
however,
you're afraid.
if your mindset is, I'm a piece of garbage, I'm dying to myself, you are not actually capable of genuinely acting for another. It actually it will retard your actual spiritual growth, because
Yes,
you're going to be doing it to prove that to prove that idea that you've internalized about yourself wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
if you start from the standpoint is like, holy, wow, the God of the universe, like, created this world to begin with and then renewed it through his own act of self-sacrificial love. It is only by a very miracle that I have happened at all. I am so grateful, and I want to express my gratitude to as many people as I possibly can,
well, it's like stepping
and
through
reflect
the
that back to them.
it's stepping through the wardrobe. That's what walking in the Christian life is. It doesn't mean that you have to be a perfect person before you step through the wardrobe.
Right.
It means that you step into it. Like, that's why I said earlier, you step into the river. You don't try to dam the river up. You don't try to shore it up. You don't build a bridge across it. You don't fix anything. You get in, right? You open the door, you go through the wardrobe, and then you see what happens next. And that's how the now is now, right? If you're trying to make yourself better, you're never living in the present. You're always living in the future.
Right.
You're
Correct.
always living in the future.
Joy, peace, and love are always supposed to be happening now,
Yeah.
not in the future.
Well, like this is our Revelation discussion, and the Bach book, right? Is that the apocalypse is now, right? Something is coming to an end, and something new is beginning.
Every moment is an apocalypse. This is in the conversation. I'm not kidding. Every
It's
moment
nested
is
apocalypses all the way down.
every moment is every moment is an apocalypse. And I was talking about this in the conversation we had about like Abraham and Isaac like earlier this morning. It's like God's revelation is like an ongoing process. And yes, there are these dramatic caesuras that like really shake us up, and really, I mean, there's like, the parting of the Red Sea, and you have God appearing to Moses on Mount Sinai, and then you have like the crucifixion, which is like the ultimate caesura that like actually inaugurates the new heaven and the new earth, like in that moment. But you know what? Every single moment as it unfolds, there is a potential apocalypse, because what is being revealed is God. And also, and it's a bilateral revelation, right? It's not only that God is being, you're also being, God is revealing you to you at the same time. Like in that revelation of God, you are also learning more about yourself too. And you have to like, you can't, which means that you kind of have to be like, you have to be embracing the world with this kind of like radical openness and radical relationality to be open to whatever is being disclosed in that moment. And you can never ever think that, oh, I have the formula, I've got all I need. Like there is no more of God that can be revealed to me. What kind of God do you think you're worshiping if you think there's no more possibility of any further revelation, that you can never learn anything more about God, that relationship can never, like, your relationship with another human being is almost infinitely complex and has infinite possibility for growth and development. How much more do you think it is with like the infinite source of your own very being?
Well, I'd say that your relationship to another person is infinite. You will never know them. You will never know them. And the same goes for the relationship between you and God. You can't know God, but you also can't know yourself. I mean, Scripture promises us that one day we will know as we are known.
But
right?
it's in the but
That's
the
what we
way
don't have.
but you only come to know, the way you come to know yourself is only in that relationship with God. There's no other path to knowing yourself.
No, there's no.
Yeah.
No, and this is the thing that I don't even think it ends, like because it's there's no end to it, because like if God is love and dynamic, right, motion, always moving, always further up and further in, this journey of knowing, this is why I think this is so important,
Right.
like when I remember years ago reading that and going, oh my God, this is the whole of it. That one day you will know as you are known, right?
Right.
Where and that knowing is infinite. God knows me infinitely, and I can know him infinitely.
Which I want to bring that back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about, oh no, Jess, sorry, Jess, didn't mean to make you nervous. But it's a qualitative infinity. Like the only true infinity actually is it's qualitative. It's like it's what is infinite is love, goodness, truth, beauty. Those are the things that are actually infinite, and they're all qualitative. Materiality is not. It's finite.
I think you should stop talking about it like that. Period. Like I think it should be talked about in analogies. it's not understood when you use the term quantitative and qualitative. There's so many possibilities for interpretation there, right? Because I think that the only way that you can express that kind of reciprocal knowing is in analogy, in a story, in the Narnia Chronicles, in George MacDonald's Phantastes, or Lilith, for example. That's where you understand what that actually,
right, because we don't know, because we can't, the infinity itself isn't, the problem is that infinity itself is an apophatic term.
Most people think infinity is a long time. Right?
Right. Or right. They just, well, I don't even, like, I don't think we have any idea what it is. Like, nor could we. I mean, it's like, the word itself is just a negation of the finite. It's the not finite. Well, okay, like, so we know what the finite is, but we really don't.
I mean, it actually has to be space, if you think about it. It has to be space, because, like, this is why I love what Lee Smolin said so much. Time is a series of events that creates space, right? And Douglas Harding says, your head, you can't see it, and it reaches to infinity, right? It's a space. It's this imagination. It's like I said about, when I sit at my spinning wheel, I could never card enough wool. I could never have enough wool. I could never have a bobbin big enough to spin all the wool that I can imagine doing things with.
Right.
All the creative processes that I could put that wool through. I wouldn't even have enough time to do it. Right? Like, when I'm spinning, I'm in infinity, because I'm thinking about all the things I could make, and that never ends. It never stops. I mean, I'm sure, Jess, I was thinking about you when I said that the other day, because you're also, as an animator, I'm sure that you could probably imagine sitting at your computer, animating forever, like for infinity, because there's never enough time, there's never enough resources to do all the things that you could imagine. And this is why.
Well, it's also the place where you get stuck, which is interesting, because like, I'll sit there and I don't make a decision of what to do, because as soon as I make a decision, I've turned all my infinity down to a smaller path. There's still more decisions to be made, but
right.
This is an interesting thing about infinity. It's almost like just exactly Peterson's conception of potential, and then
you're talking
like narrowing yourself down, and like I have personally, like experientially, like I have a problem of narrowing myself down and doing something, and what ends up happening is those narrowing things happen to me, and then I'm like, well, I didn't want to do that, but I ended up doing that anyway because it just happened. Whereas if I, it almost gets to Peterson's question to McGilchrist, like, what drives you? Why did you do this instead of anything else?
But that infinity, like that infinity of potential, and that infinity of potency is exactly like I talked about quantitative, but we can talk about it in terms of imagination or potency too.
Yeah,
that is also actually limited. And it's limited because it is a capacity that exists that exists within the finite, within the created. Like
I don't think imagination is. I don't think it's limited.
Let's set that. Why? I think you're right, but there's a very specific reason why that particular faculty is not.
Because I agree with MacDonald in that we exist in the imagination of God. Our imagination is God's imagination. Our thoughts are his thoughts.
Right.
And so I think that's why I used that example of me imagining, right? And I'm not really talking about potential in this sense. If I imagine all the things I could do with my wool, I would never get up from my spinning wheel, you know, like I would never stop, right? We have to do other things in the world in order to live, you know, which, yeah, but my imagination reaches into infinity. Like it does. It just does. It never stops. It never stops.
Yeah, which like I mean you're talking about it in a positive sense. Like there's so much like you don't get bored. You don't like there's never a point where you've done everything. But
And you can't imagine something else. Like you never have a moment where
right.
you couldn't imagine something else.
Right. But like for me, that's a place where I actually get stuck and I don't like it. Because
there's too many possibilities.
There's
Okay.
There's too many possibilities, and really maybe it has more to do less with the possibilities, but it actually has to do with fear, because it's like once I do something, then that thing can be, you know, you can't critique infinity possibilities,
Maybe
but
this
you
is
can.
the difference. Maybe this is the difference, Jess, because I'm talking about spinning. So I'm creating a resource with which to work.
Right.
Maybe if I said to you, what are the possibilities for the color red? You just be like, what can you imagine you could do with the color red?
Everything.
There it is. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. If you were making the color red in a vat, right, with cochin beetles, you would never stop thinking. You could never exhaust the imagination about what to do with that color. Right? That's what I'm talking about.
But what is that? What are you talking about? What is the nature of that imagining though? What is that?
That's your co-creative process.
Creative. That's the word I was trying to bring out, that I was trying to bring out of this. Yes, that. So
well, this is interesting, because like my mind immediately goes to, what am I going to create then?
Right.
So I'm already thinking about knitting the gloves, or knitting the hat, or knitting out of the wool. Like I've already moved from spinning and imagining, like creating the resource.
So what's actually created,
I'm already onto like, what am I going to create? And then I'm fearful that thing is not going to be any good.
No, you're fearful that you've limited yourself because you're imagining.
But you have to, or you couldn't create anything.
No, you feel like you've limited yourself. And what you're actually feeling is the fear of, or not the fear, but the experience of moving from the infinite to the finite.
Right.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is, Jess.
That is it. And so because because you can't just live in the infinite. You can't just live in Cloud City.
No, but see, if you can experience the infinite, right? If you can actually put stand in front of that vat of red coloring and experience the infinite, then to reduce yourself down to the finite, right, which is making a choice and making something with it. That's terrifying, because it's only one thing.
Yep.
It's only one thing.
And how does it compare to the things you can imagine?
Yeah. And it never will, actually. And it's in a sense, it's terribly dissatisfying, right? But I think that is also can be, I mean, I'm just speaking from as a creator of things, that can be a motivator to actually make the most beautiful thing. Because you're not just going to make something for the sake of making it, but you're actually going to take that and you're going to make it the most beautiful, that you have the talent.
But notice how there's an implicit relationship between finitude and infinity here, where like the infinite is in the creator or sub-creator mode. That's where you have access to the infinite, but then the creation is finite.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
This is what I was trying to push us toward.
Thank you, Nate.
But here's the
Well,
thing,
that's the Trinity.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
The relationship
Um,
between the Father and the Son, and then the Spirit is the thing that leads the Son to be something specific,
Well, it's also
to
the
do
creation
something specific.
story, right? It's the reason that we live within the finite.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how I understood it when you explained that, Nate. It's like, you know, the infinite pressing in on something, right? Taking this potential, as Peterson would say, and making it actual. It is the finite. It just has to
right.
be.
What is
Like,
actual?
it's like I take my imagination, and while I'm spinning wool and I make a hat. Well, that's it. It's contained. It's within the confines of the finite, right?
Right.
That is the
So
act of
you've actualized the potency in that wool
yeah.
and made it into, it was only a potential hat before you set to work and made it into an actual hat.
Mhm.
That this is why in like the
Yeah,
class this is why in the classical formulation, like God is conceived of as pure act. So it's like, I think there's a difference though between, see, I don't think this is where I think when we reflect our own consciousness, where we like contemplate from all these different potentialities, and we have to make a decision about what to bring into actuality. Because God is pure act, I don't think God is different from us in that way. Like the minute, the- like because God is pure act, like there's no opting out of, no opting out of creating. Like there's no deciding between options.
You mean for God?
Correct.
Yeah. No. That just that goes into what were you going to say before, Jess? Actually, before I say that.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Well, we were talking about what does that sacrifice of the lamb look like? Remember?
Yeah.
And I just had this like idea of it being like which was really poor. I don't know if someone could help me with this, but the uncorking of a bottle, and this is just overflowing
Mhm.
of life, basically, in the form of love, right? Life and love all at the same time, and that act is it's abundant, right? Like it never runs out. It has no depth to it. I think that this is the idea of the ineffable as well. Like, that it can't be known because it doesn't ever stop, and it never stops creating.
Yeah, it's I kind of remember what I was what I was thinking about was that, like, the infinite is just infinite resource. Like and we have a connection to God as the infinite. So you never run out of anything. But what you do have, but you don't, what you do isn't infinite. What you do is finite. So what you create. So
But
your
that,
imagination
but that
of what you can create with the wool never is exhausted. But and then you make a hat, and it may not be the most perfect hat, but the thing you get is something real. Now you actually have a hat.
Yeah.
And there's some aspects where God is more concerned. I say he's concerned. God wants things to be real more than he wants things to be perfect. Like, he's more concerned with things becoming real, and this is gets into being and becoming, and it's towards perfection or something. But I don't even know.
Real is perfect, isn't it? Isn't real perfect?
It's,
Like,
I guess it's got to be. Like, maybe
right.
that's.
I think the idea of perfect is more of an idea of whole, right? Like not fragmented in you.
Well, that's why I keep talking about the being and becoming distinction. Like, it's like only God is. We have being. Like, this is why the divine name is I am, right? Like, we have our being contingently, completely contingently from God. Without participation in God, we could not exist.
Right.
We are being brought into a completed state of being, but we are not there yet. That's what theosis is about.
I just want to, can I just read about this creative faculty and imagination? Can I just read something here?
Yeah.
Of course.
George?
I gotta get going here in a second. Too.
Yeah,
Sure.
I
We'll
do
just
too.
go ahead and we'll just go ahead and end with this.
Okay. We must begin with a definition of the word imagination, or rather some description of the faculty to which we give the name. The word itself means an imaging or making of likenesses. The imagination is that faculty which gives form to thought, but not necessarily uttered form, but form capable of being uttered in shape or in sound or in any mode upon which the senses can lay hold. It is therefore that faculty in man which is likest to the prime operation of the power of God, and has therefore been called the creative faculty, and its exercise, creation. Poet means maker. We must not forget, however, that between creator and poet lies the one unpassable gulf which distinguishes, far be it from us to say divides, all that is God's from all that is man's. A gulf teeming with infinite revelation, but a gulf over which no man can pass to find out God, although God needs not to pass over it to find man. The gulf between that which calls and that which is thus called into being, between that which makes its own image and that which is made in that image. It is better to keep the word creation for that calling out of nothing, which is the imagination of God, except it be an occasional symbolic expression whose daring is fully recognized of the likeness of man's work to the work of his maker. The necessary unlikeness between the creator and the created holds within it the equally necessary likeness of the thing made to him who makes it, and so the work of the made to the work of the maker. When therefore refusing to employ the word creation of the work of man, we yet use the word imagination of the work of God, we cannot be said to dare at all. It is only to give the name of man's faculty to that power after which and by which it was fashioned. The imagination of man is made in the image of the imagination of God. Everything of man must have been of God first, and it will help much toward our understanding of the imagination and its function in man if we first succeed in regarding aright the imagination of God, in which the imagination of man lives and moves and has its being. And that's why I feel like it's infinite. Like
I like a lot. Yeah, right.
I'm
Like,
super happy to hear McGilchrist talk about imagination.
and that last line is like, I mean, that's talking about participation, live and move and have our being. That's like by participation and only by participation, because we are contingent. And
It's
also I like
almost by
the
default,
line
right?
being
It's
right.
almost by default. Like
Right.
we just are, right?
And then the line about being drawn toward being. That's exactly right. We're being drawn toward being. We
Yeah.
are not yet in being.
Yeah.
Like we can't really yet say I am, which is why we should just like get over this crazy idea of like, being able to assert our own imagined identities. Because we don't know what we are yet.
Do we have to do a part 3 now? Do we get through that whole thing?
I think we covered, like, we got through, like, I think we missed like part of the last 20 minutes of the conversation, but we could, like, that last segment was so deep, we could probably do innumerable conversations, but I think we've done like 6 hours almost on this. So I think that's an adequate treatment. I think we'll wait for there'll be a next thing for sure. Like, for sure. In fact, I actually think the next thing, I think that Abraham Isaac discussion was so good that I think that there's a lot of potential there.
What is that? I'm not familiar.
This morning, you have to catch up. We had it this morning over.
Oh,
Vox.
okay. I'll have to watch it.
No, not watch it. Just it's on Vox. It's a back and forth. It's like
Oh, I see. Okay.
I pushed Luke. I pushed Luke to the breaking point of exposing his residual Calvinism. It's like I just got way too radical for him. He's like, even Luke had to say, "Whoa, stop right there." So, thank you guys for having this conversation
Nate.
with me today. I appreciate it. I'll let you know when I
Yeah,
get posted.
great.
All right.